Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 306. Are tech industry layoffs still top of mind for you, dear listener? This week, we're going to look at layoff events from multiple different angles, including one we haven't previously discussed in depth. Brad Pinkston is back to discuss the impact of layoff events over the course of his career. In part one of our discussion with Brad in episode 305, we talked about his reasons in moving from a large company to a startup. We also talked about the mismatch in expectations between what he thought the job was going to be and what it actually turned out to be. And at the end of that discussion, we heard about Brad leaving one startup to join another. In part two of our discussion this week, Brad's going to share what it was like to get laid off from that second startup and a little bit about how he processed it. Then we're going to talk about the flip side of layoffs. What happens when there's a layoff event and you are not someone who's impacted? You might be feeling something we call survivor's guilt. And then what's it like to return to a team that you once managed, this time as an individual contributor? Let's get the full story as we continue part two of our discussion with Brad Pinkston.
Yeah, I left, or I was asked to leave as part of a layoff. It was a definite low moment, we'll put it that way.
Unfortunately, we're seeing that a lot in our industry right now. Can you break down a little bit how you sort of processed that event when someone makes a choice on your behalf and you get told, hey, your job is ending?
In my situation, Nick, I guess mentally, I could see that my position really did need to be eliminated.
Oh, okay.
I try to analyze things this way because I don't like to get very emotional because emotions start to run away when snowball downhill kind of thing if I don't go back to the analytical side of my mind. The startup was taking a chance on trying to create something. After months of trying to create it, it didn't work. You know, maybe a bigger company could have taken me and put me in a different place, but this is startup world, right? If we're abandoning the strategy, we're abandoning, people that were hired to execute the strategy. So that's the way that I analyzed it mentally. Emotionally, it wasn't easy because I'm worried about financially, how am I going to provide for the kids, and do we have enough money, and all these kinds of things and all that. And then the thing that I will never say as a manager again, I say again, I don't think I've ever said it, I will ensure that I never say it, is you're great, you're really good, you're not going to have any problem finding a job. We'll keep the podcast clean. But the things that I want to say to people when they say, that's the worst thing that you can say.
Right.
If I'm so great, why did you need to eliminate me as opposed to repurposing me or something like that? So that was the biggest emotional reaction I had to the entire thing. And, it's one of those, what do you do? I think that managers or, people that have to deliver that news, they say that thinking that it's going to help you be more confident, but it is not helpful at all. It is a shot to the gut emotionally. So if you're ever in the place where you have to deliver that news, don't say that.
It's something that you said a little bit earlier, which was hey, I didn't react to that emotionally, the way that intellectually I knew that I should, is one of those things that I talk about all the time, which is like, we are not machines, and our emotional reactions they just are, right? Whether or not it makes sense intellectually, it is what happens. Like, here's my emotional reaction. And, you can do all the intellectualization that you want. That doesn't change what the emotional reaction was.
Right.
I think I had to learn that in my just interpersonal relationships, right? Hey, I said this thing. I said it this way. You took my meaning to be something, and that's not at all what I meant.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense that you're reacting that way. It's like, okay, well, that's neither here nor there. It's like the person is reacting the way that they're reacting. And, you can just do all the explaining that you want. That's not going to change the emotional reaction. So,
right.
I think the problem that we fall into sometimes is when you intellectualize and you go, well, I shouldn't be having this reaction. And now I feel worse because now I'm not living up to my intellectual standard. Right. And it's like, now I'm failing again because I'm having this emotional reaction. And you can really spiral that way. I say I can really spiral that way.
Oh, certainly.
So there's an amount of grace that I try to give myself. And I think every time this topic comes up, I try to hold it up to the light. Hey, it doesn't make sense that I'm reacting that way. Yeah. Okay. But you are.
It's the only time that it's happened to me, right?
Then you're in luck.
Exactly. That's another thing that we had talked about that we wanted to discuss is it was the only time that it's happened to me. So, I was trying to look at the other side, even though I was emotionally reacting to this. Oh, you're going to be fine. Everybody. Yeah, don't say that. But on the other hand, I probably could have been just as emotionally angry if they would have just come in and, well, here are the facts of the matter, and said bye in 5 minutes. And then I would have been upset about the fact that, they didn't care at all. So there's no way to receive or deliver that news in a way that's going to be positive. You can only control, levels of bad in that scenario, in my opinion.
There's that movie Up in the Air where George Clooney's job is to fly around and fire people.
Right.
He's a consultant. And the thing that he does for companies is fire people. And there was a line of patterns hey, everybody who ever built something important sat in a chair where you're sitting right now, or they need to get let go from their comfortable job to go out and do their great thing. I'm like, oh, there's a level of emotional manipulation there that I don't think that I'm ever going to be comfortable with.
Yeah, and it was not delivered in such a Clooney way for me. I mean, the advice that I would give to anybody that goes through that is kind of what I think you were alluding to, John. I'm lucky that it's only happened to me once, because it happens all the time in our industry. That's the advice I would give anybody is there's a part of an emotion where I just got fired. I'm not good enough. This happens to everybody. It is so common. Don't hold it internal. Let your network know what just happened to you, because if you've done what you should have done as a person and as a professional, they're there to help you. Now, whether they can or not is a different story. That's why it's a good idea to not be afraid to tell everyone so that you cast the net wide. Don't be ashamed of being laid off. It is what it is. If you haven't been laid off or fired, just wait a few years.
Hey, it happened to me. My joke is myself and 11,000 of my closest friends were fired from Google on the same day. And it was a humbling situation. And, one of the things that I did, to be part of a mass layoff like that is well, that's not personal. Somebody didn't go oh, John is bad, so I'm going to put him on this list of 11,000 people. Right. But it was definitely a coping thing, right? Because that's still, it doesn't feel good. Right. I didn't wake up the next morning going man, this is an amazing day.
Yeah. Right. Typically, they're not giving out severance packages where you're saying, I don't have to work anymore. This is awesome.
Right.
A little bit later on in life than you and I are at right now.
Right. I wasn't a C-level executive. It's
Right. It wasn't a golden parachute.
No, I haven't been that successful.
No, same here. One of these days.
Right. One of the things that we were going to talk about was the flip side when the organization that you're with is going through that and you are not on that list. Or like from my chair where I feel like I have all these like really good friends in other organizations where people are being laid off and it's not happening to me. There's this like survivor's guilt aspect of it. I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but it's definitely something that I'm going through. I'm sitting where I'm sitting, not because of how amazing I am, but because of, a roll of the dice, literally a roll of the dice. And that's like a difficult thing to deal with. Maybe this is just a me thing.
No, I've been through it and actually had some of the conversations with some of my peers before and after it happened, John, like the same thing. And I don't know if everybody handles things this way, but I think I've already mentioned it before. Like, I'm super analytical, engineer at heart. There wasn't another job meant for me, right? And so the thing that I spoke with one of my peers about was, is this going to be a roll of the dice? Because if on the other end I can kind of see why or how this happened, that would be, significantly different on how I handle it as, someone who eventually, in my scenario, did survive the layoff in that scenario. So knowing that it wasn't a roll of the dice, or I say knowing it wasn't a roll of the dice, like I kind of understand where the organization was going and why, and the right sizing that they were attempting to do was something that was really important to me that you kind of allude to.
At least in my mind, when I went through it, and what I see even today from a distance is like, I see like really good people getting let go. And I'm like, oh, if I was in a position to like, have an organization like that, that would be like one of the first people that I would say, like, never let this person leave the company ever. And to see people like that let go, that is exactly what happened when I was at Google, right? It was like, oh, there's all these people that are being let go. And it's like, why would that person ever be, let go from any company, much less the one that we just left? I think maybe it's like a completely different situation from like if you're in an organization and like all of a sudden, like every single incompetent person that you ever dealt with at that company got fired on the same day. And you're like, oh, thank goodness. Like, finally that's happened, right? As like horrible even as that would be for all those people, it's just not what any of us are experiencing, right? Like we're all going through seeing good friends who are really good at their jobs, that are really valuable, being let go from organizations that they belong to, into a job market where other companies are doing the same thing. So you see a lot of different people from a lot of different organizations, right? So I don't know that that's ever easy to deal with. I mean, it's much worse if you're one of those people, but as much as I let it, it impacts my like emotional well-being of like, what am I doing right? Like, I don't know that I've done anything better than anybody else that I happen to still be sitting here, right?
Yep, and I thought through the same kind of stuff, like the team that I was on, and still on, but, restructured now, just an amazing group of engineers, right? It's one of those where, not to make light of the situation, but it is real, where sometimes in that scenario, the strategy is, let's not be the slowest gazelle. You know what I mean? Well, this was a scenario where there wasn't a slow gazelle. So, you're really humbled to still be there. And we go back to the roll in the dice. Like, it's hard to figure out why me? The people that were let go, or that, unfortunately aren't part of the organization anymore, like, why was I picked? Because this was not that was the slowest gazelle kind of situation. It wasn't that at all. So there's a lot of, survivor's guilt with, why am I the one that gets to hang around? Like, I'm thankful for it. It's humbling, and it's also, I don't know a better term for it than survivor's guilt.
It creates an awkward feeling. On one hand, you're like, man, I'm selfish to feel this way because I'm still employed and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. What business do I have of feeling bad?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I survived, right?
Right. It's not like these people aren't my friends anymore. So I want to try and maintain those friendships. Is there some way I can help them? Well, I hope so. I hope I would try to do that. Be encouraging if I can. But then you have this awkward situation. Yes, they're still your friends, but what do you say? You encourage, It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's just a bad situation all around, which is why, I know that executive leadership, especially in, we won't even bring up politics, but, we're all hearing it about greedy executives and things like that. They have to make those hard decisions. Those hard decisions for the life of the company or the good of the organization, all that. It's a hard decision to make. And I'm not saying that they're all made in the right way or anything like that. We can all highlight plenty of those that, well, did you really have to lay off that number of people and then, write all those executive bonuses? There's plenty of those examples also, but it's hard for those executive leaders to make those decisions. And then the thing that I made sure and communicate to my management, when I was told that I still had a seat left at the table, it's not easy for them to deliver that message either. I made sure and, of course, tell them that I was thankful. I appreciate, not only appreciate still having a seat, but when all this is happening, you're in limbo. You have no idea, am I getting a call? Am I getting a good call? Am I getting a bad call? And then even the good calls, good for me, that's not a good or a bad call for the manager calling to deliver that. It's just another call that they've got to deliver. And I feel for the folks that have to deliver that message because a lot of times they're not even part of the decision on who is going to get a good call or a bad call.
They're just the executioner.
Right.
Or the one who carries out the plan. Just like in your job where you didn't get to make the strategy, you just had to carry it out.
Yeah. And that is, in a nutshell, more of middle management than people realize. Even at good companies, you got to deliver bad news.
Yeah, absolutely. I gained a lot of respect. I saw somebody deliver news like that, and it was kind of a one-off situation. It wasn't in the middle of a layoff or anything like that. But like the thing that the manager did was like literally hook the person up with like a job that was better suited for them. Right? Hey, I don't think that you're fitting in with what it is that we need, but that doesn't mean that you're not valuable. I think that you are valuable, and you're valuable to the point where I've actually talked to these people in my network, and they are willing to give you a serious interview right now because they need somebody. And the problem with a layoff situation is like, there's not that much slack in people's networks, right? There's 1,000 people hitting the market in this geography today. It's like, there's probably not 1,000 jobs out there. There might be 1,000 over the next 6 to 9 months that are, need filling, but yeah, it's tough. I've tried to give to my network to the degree that I can, to be open to talking to people, to counsel them, to tell them that this is not the end of your career. This is a comma in your career. Your career is a long book, and this is maybe not even like the end of a chapter. It might be in the middle. You can't even honestly say like, oh, you're not going to have a problem getting a job because, again, like there's a lot of companies making tech layoffs right now. So there's a lot of competition in the job market. It's really, really difficult. I think, somebody made the observation to me that's like, yeah, like probably 5 years from now, we're going to see some like really amazing, innovative startups that have been created by people, as a result of like all these good people being let go. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't help me at all. That is a great intellectualization, and that is not going to help me like talk to my friends who have like lost their positions. 5 years from now.
Right.
Yet another thing to not say to somebody, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That is a celebration for future Brad, not present Brad.
Yeah.
in that context.
Right.
Present Brad's the one that's worried about today.
Do you think the manager or leader that has to do the execution of those layoffs actually feels that same survivor's guilt in some way?
I've never had to deliver the layoff news. I've been lucky. I've had to manage some people out of the business, and I've been lucky enough to manage people into better roles like you talked about, John. So I can't speak from personal experience on that, Nick, but I've got to think that the second line and frontline managers that I've worked with, I know that they all felt it. I think it's probably a different thing. I've got to think that if I was in that role and having to execute, delivering the information and delivering those decisions and delivering the bad news, I would probably be just more heartbroken over having to execute it and having to do something that I don't want to do. And that would be more painful than probably the eventual survivor's guilt, where, all of us that are on a team that, gets reduced 20, 30, 40% or whatever it might be, we're just feeling that survivor's guilt, but we didn't have anybody cuss us out because we got the bad news. And I don't know if that has happened in any of the scenarios that I've been a part of, but it has to.
Oh, sure.
Where somebody just reacts just very, very aggressively, very angrily, and I would think that would be the thing that the managers delivering the news have to grapple with in their brain before they're even worried about survivor's guilt.
Yeah, just that process of having to let people go that are good at their jobs, that could be like extremely valuable, maybe even important to your success as a manager, right? To say, the organization doesn't need you anymore. That can't feel good.
And you hit the point home there, John. I mean, like, that's what's happening right now, unfortunately, is these layoffs aren't the kinds where, we're going to do a 10% reduction in force and, oh, that guy got let go? Well, I'm not surprised by that. These are people that and that's why we're all talking about survivor's guilt. These are people that are, significantly skilled individuals that are impacted by a decision made that was totally out of their control, regardless of how they performed and skill set and all that. So I think that's where this survivor's guilt, and we keep going back to the same, terminology, because there's nothing any easier. Like, it's that feeling is just, it's hard to get past.
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier, right? Like, you were part of a layoff where a company made a strategic decision. They said, hey, this is part of a business that we're getting out of, or, we're overstaffed for this. And intellectually, maybe understandable. Emotionally, we're people and we don't react that way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know that we have an answer for this. I think my coping mechanism, and I'll turn it that way, is to, like, when I see these types of announcements on LinkedIn where people are talking about going through this, like, I try to reach out to people and I'll say, hey, I'm here to talk about it. I might not even be in a position to offer you a job, but I am in a position to offer you a listen. And maybe I have some advice. Maybe you're not even in a position to take advice right now. So whatever it is that you need from, a former colleague or even just a tangential colleague, I'll offer you 2 ears and hopefully a closed mouth.
Luckily for me, I was not unemployed very, very long. Like I said, intellectually, it was not a bad decision for the company. So I kind of saw it coming, and I was a little bit prepared. I don't think that everybody is always in that situation. So again, been really lucky. But one thing that I would give advice to, whether you're the person that's been laid off, or if you're dealing with the survivor's guilt of not being laid off, or even maybe if your company didn't go through layoffs, or you just feel bad about the fact that this is happening in the industry, reach out to those folks and let them know that you're there. And the fact that, you're willing to be a reference, or, like man, I highly respect you. I think that you're really good at what you do, and I will be a reference for you or talk to anybody I can, that kind of thing. Like, it is confidence building. It is kind of, well, I'm still sitting on the couch at 11 a.m. drinking my coffee because I'm kind of in this funk. But Nick just reached out and told me that he thinks that I'm awesome and would love to be a reference for me. I'm ready for the day now.
I do think you're awesome, Brad.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate that. It does go a long way to reminding that person that's in a funk that get out there and do something about it. You've got a network. You've got resources at your disposal. You've just got to marshal them. So this is more of a, in my opinion, advice for those of us that can help our colleagues. Make sure and reach out to those folks, even if it's just if you don't know how I think about you, this is what I think of you, and, I'm here to help however I can. It's small, but it goes a long, long way.
And if you want some helpful resources that I've seen, here they are. Do with them what you want. Feel free to use it, delete it. Just trying to help if it helps you.
Right.
Man, oh man, like one of the things that I realized is that our industry goes through these like swings where it's just, impossible to find people to hire. And then all of a sudden it's impossible to like get a job. And those swings are like 2 years apart. When I got laid off from Google Cloud, like I looked at the number of sales engineering jobs in the country that were available. It was something like 200,000. My stress level just went down, all of a sudden. That's what getting laid off 2 years ago was like. But getting laid off today is a little bit different. There's multiple companies doing 5,000, 10,000 layoffs at a time. So there's a lot of people that are in the market, and that just makes it tougher. Not impossible, just tougher. Not everybody has the ability to wait out 2 years. That's just sometimes not an option. But the fact of the matter is that 2 years from now, everything can be like very, very different.
100%. Well, and that's probably about the length of time you've been actually longer than that. You've been an individual contributor now, Brad. Just give us your thoughts on remaining individual contributor this long. And would you ever go back to people leadership, or are you enjoying the individual contributor life too much?
Oh, man, that's a really loaded question, Nick.
Hope it's cool that I went there.
You're going to get a very political answer because it is really how I feel. I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm literally back on the team that I managed 5 years ago. I'm a member of the team that I managed, so long ago, which brings us full circle to a question you asked about how do you handle that?
Mm-hmm.
My manager, when I came back, he kind of indirectly reported to me 5 years previously. Back to that you asked earlier, I'm going to take it down a tangent, and then I promise I'll land the plane on the question that you asked. But that was the hardest thing about the transitioning back and that kind of thing. Like, how do I have these conversations and be helpful with my experience, but make sure that he knows that I know that it's his team and I respect his leadership and will follow him? That was the hardest thing that I've dealt with the manager to individual contributor transition. When I joined back on the team, like, I had hired or recruited probably 80% of that team to come on board. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knew I'm here to be one of the team members and I'm not going to step on anybody's toes. And luckily, great group of people, great team. It was executed it was executed flawlessly. I'm not even going to add the almost in there because it would say that it would make it sound like something went wrong, but everything went really, really well. But back to the question that spawned that, which would I want to go back into people management, or am I, loving being an individual contributor? It's yes and yes, honestly. I'm very lucky to be working with a team that I really like working with, sales team and, technical SE peers. I would say that I'm not in a rush by any means, but I do want to go back into people management. I did enjoy it. I think that I'll be much, much more picky with the role than I was when I transitioned to the startup. I'll ask a lot more of those insightful questions, John, like we talked about earlier, to make sure that I have the right expectations and all that. But I do think that the story will come full circle back to that for me, Nick, because there's too many aspects of it that I miss. I see what you did there. You took me in a big loop and we landed exactly where we took off. So I like what you guys did, but I hope that answers your question directly.
Yeah, I think it does. I like what you said about having to get used to, working for someone who indirectly reported to you before. That's got to be a challenge. What we've heard from other people is when they went from manager to individual contributor, they wanted to get closer to the technology in that case, and they missed that part. Did you find yourself missing that part as well? Because I didn't actually hear that highlighted before.
A little bit, but for me, it was more get back and get closer to the customers. I really enjoyed getting back in front of customers and building customer relationships and not be the John, you and I can laugh at ourselves because I know you've done it. I enjoyed not being the sport coat walking into the room that was just there because I asked one of the SEs on my team if I could come to the meeting. I'm, of course, being tongue-in-cheek. Like, we make these jokes. I do believe that if you're a good leader and you're a good manager, that you contribute more than just being another sport coat in a meeting. I'm just trying to add some humor, maybe ineffectively, so I want to be very clear that I respect all SE managers a lot more than the jokes that I'm making. But that's the thing that I've loved the most is building real relationships directly with customers, with my technical peers, and being able to influence the strategies that they're deploying. I could never do a job and work with technology that I did not wholeheartedly believe in. So I do believe that anything that I ever sell will make a customer's life better. And being able to work with them, to influence them that way, and then see it pay off has been fantastic. So that's the thing that, kind of holds me back from going into people management, because you get away from that. Instead, what you're doing is you're investing in the people on your team and making them better, and then you see it pay off. But a lot of times when it pays off, they go on to another team. So you don't get to, see the long-term engagement there like I'm getting to see now that I've been back in the role for 2 years.
I just had my first person promoted out from my team. And I think I said going into the job that if I could be judged by my success in doing that, and I am successful, like that would be a badge that I would wear proudly. I guess I kind of think of that as this is the positive effect of working with John, is that, it positively affects how you're viewed and your level of excellence rises. But you're right, you don't get to follow that success in the long term. You get to just observe it in the long term and not be a direct participant in it.
Yeah, the most bittersweet moment I had like that, John, is I had a person on my team that family was moving away, and they were looking for roles in that geography and looking internally, right? And we were working on things together, and it kind of petered off interest in us talking about those kind of things. And that's when I got the news, which was good news in what we're talking about. She took a promotion outside the company. And, the little bit that I had to do to contribute to that, it's my most regrettable attrition, but also, a great moment because she took a bigger, better role for her career-wise. It just wasn't inside the company. So good for her, but the company lost. So bittersweet kind of moment there.
Yeah, totally understandable. Man, oh man, I hope that we're giving advice that is affecting people positively.
I was going to say, John, if you want another measurement for the positive impacts you've had on someone, it's been over 300 episodes for me.
Hey, there you go.
Take that one to the bank.
That's a great metric. Brad, as we kind of wrap up here, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share? I kind of see this overall theme in kind of the things that you've experienced. Now, I actually have to come up with that overall theme, which is a problem. I just said it hoping that something would pop into my mind.
Were you just hoping that I would say it?
You know exactly what I'm talking about, Nick, that theme that I'm seeing? No? Okay.
No, I do. The theme I see is, so you like to build things, you want to make a big impact. When you don't get to do that, there's not a lot of job satisfaction. But the impact for you can be with the customers you serve and good relationships with them, or the team you serve as a people manager. And then, you've been through the big company, the startup, and back to the big company again. And you've kind of demonstrated that someone can succeed, whether they're a people manager or an individual contributor, regardless of where they started and regardless of which one they went to, because the mindfulness of what you were stepping into and how you could make an impact, I think, was put into every step along the way. And we heard about it throughout what you said. Does that sound like something John White would say? That was my best John White impression, okay?
That's exactly what I was going for, Nick. I'm glad that we're
we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
Halfway across the country away from each other, and you guys still have the ESP going. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, along with the fact that, just because you're not a people manager doesn't mean that you can't affect people's careers, positively, right? You can still, mentor people in and out of the organization, within the partner ecosystem, at the customers. Like all those things are still possible, and you can still get that emotional satisfaction from experiencing their success as well, even if it's, not as their direct manager.
I mean, I think we'd still be behind keyboards more than we are. I'll put it that way. If we didn't enjoy the people side of what we do, whether that's as an individual contributor interacting with customers and, the satisfaction you get out of that, or if it's mentoring folks on your team and the satisfaction you get out of that, or if it's back to the layoffs and the survivor guilt stuff that we talked about, if it's just impacting the people in your network. I used to tell my team that we need to impact process, pipeline, and people. Hit all three every day, and you've had a successful day. You bet 1,000, right? Pipeline, what new stuff did you generate? Even if we're not talking about dollars, what new conversations did you generate? And then process, make sure that you're, efficient, that we're taking care of things. But the people was always the biggest piece to me, whether my team was impacting each other, impacting a customer, or, whatever it is. I think at the end of the day, that's the most important piece to me. But I'm impacting it in so many different ways, and so many different big companies, small companies, through layoffs, being part of them, or being the one being laid off. The people impact is always the most important piece of it to me.
There's that mic drop moment that we're always looking for.
There's the theme. I had to come up with it for Nick.
Well, I tried to do it for John, and we had to get you to do it for both of us. So I'm just glad we got there.
Well, I did come up with that on the fly. I was going to say something totally different when John pivoted to you.
Well, listen, Brad, we want to say a big thank you for coming back, updating us on your story, sharing your wisdom and knowledge with everybody. Where can people find you if they want to follow up on this conversation?
Probably LinkedIn, because I want to encourage everybody, especially in this time where we've all got so much going on. I think my LinkedIn handle is just Brad Pinkston. I'm certain it's just Brad Pinkston. So, yeah, find me on LinkedIn. With the time that we're going through, stay focused on your network, and the biggest thing that I would encourage anybody to do is, just reach out to your peers and reach out to me there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Brad.
Thanks, guys.
Some of these topics are tough to take on, but if you need more support on the topic of layoffs, whether you've been impacted or it's just something that's top of mind, check out our Nerd Journey Layoff Resources page at nerd-journey.com/layoff resources. That's one word, layoff resources. On that page, we've curated a list of the most impactful discussions from the show with practical tips on the topic of layoffs. And we'll certainly make sure this discussion with Brad gets added to that page shortly after its release. What are we missing on the topic of layoffs in the tech industry? We'd love to hear your feedback. Shoot us an email, nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com. So for Brad, it was about impacting the people in whatever role he was in. What is it that you like to impact the most? Maybe there's a way that you can impact something you love or something you really enjoy, but perhaps there's a way to do it through different job roles, whether you're a people manager, an individual contributor, a team lead, or you even take an adjacent role and work in a different department than you do now. Maybe you like to impact the technology architecture at a company or the technology footprint and help clean up technical debt. Maybe it's about high-level strategy. Maybe it's about the future direction of a particular product at the company and its roadmap. Maybe it's the fact that you like to make an impact on the people around you, but you have no interest in becoming a people leader. Perhaps you need to become a mentor. I hope you enjoyed this discussion with Brad. I know in these difficult conversations, we don't always come out with a clear answer on what you should do or how you should handle it. But I hope the conversation's been helpful as you think through some of these tough topics to process in your own life.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.